Hello everybody, and today we will be doing What If Deku Had Articuno's Powers, Part 2. I will be doing this week. We have a poll currently on the channel, and it says, what will I do for this week? And every video that is at the top for each day will be getting either a new part, or will, if I finish that series, taken out. Basically, if that one has the highest and I finish the series, I'll just go with whatever is the second biggest. So yeah, this is Obito signing off. No, not signing off, signing in. And yeah, onto the video. Okay, guys, so the story continues right after Izuku runs over to her sibling and says, everybody, I got into Shiketsu. How'd you two do? As Sai looks to her and says, well, I'm in, S1. As she's like, what do you mean S1? What letter? As he looks, oh. Sorry, guys, about that. My brother is, kicking the phone. Anyway, Izuku looks over to, Sai and says, well, what is it? As Sai says, oh, one sec. As he says, S1A. And Ray says, oh, same. As Izuku's like, oh, so we're all in the same class. That's interesting. As their mother comes in from the front door and says, how do you kids do on the exam? You better have done well. As they all say, we got in. And we got into the top class. As she's like, good job, you all. In a couple of years now, you'll be making money. As she walks by. And Izuku just thinks, her again. As the next day, Izuku and their siblings go over to UA. And when they get there, Izuku, Ray, and Sai quickly go into the building and find one essay. And when they do find it eventually, they get it just barely before the bell. And the teacher yells at them and says, how are you two late? First day, geez, get into your seats quickly. As he starts explaining the lesson. And around 15 minutes go by, and the teacher says, well, it's time for, what's it called? Assembly. No, orientation. Orientation. As all the students quickly go to orientation, and since I have literally no idea how that would go, because we haven't seen Shiketsu orientation. Yeah, we'll be skipping that. But during the event, I'm going to say there were two people staring at Izuku, and they liked her. I'll leave that for part 3, but I will let you guys know that I have thought about these ships, and one definitely won over the comments, and the other one is my personal ship. So yeah, guys, if you go back into the comments from part 1, you know who one person is. Not that hard to tell. And if you've been a member of the channel for a long time, you'll definitely know the other person. I talk about it a lot. So yeah, Ishuka waves at Todoroki and says, "Why were you staring at me?" As Todoroki, well, the two students that are in the ships, will say, are in Shiketsu, and we'll say they just underperformed enough there. And Endeavor ended up sending him to Shiketsu because he didn't want his son going to the school that All Might went to. And the other person got their second choice, obviously. They didn't go to UA. They didn't get accepted in this timeline. And yeah, I'll just reveal it now. It's Ochako. Uraraka. Because it's canon and you can't fight me on that. Anyway, Ishuka walks over to the two of them and says, "Hello," as Ochako quickly starts blushing and says, "Hello," as Todoroki says, "You're pretty," as Ishuka looks at him and says, "What?" As she quickly runs away blushing in like a tomato. Basically like Ochako. In the anime, obviously. And Ishuka goes to her sisters and says, I think a boy likes me, as they start teasing her on it. And after orientation, the day was over, obviously. And yeah, so physical exams never happened because we don't have Aizawa. And we'll say Shinso and some other kid. We'll say the mushroom girl because she's adorable. Yeah. And yeah, they go to 1A in UA high school. So in Shiketsu high school, then very next day, Ishuka gets into class and the teacher says, "Okay, everybody, today we'll be sharing a facility from UA and we'll be taking a little field trip over there for some what's it called?" As it's like a fill in the blank thing. As one student says rescue training. As he's like, correct. As a couple minutes pass by and they go over to the bus and take a trip. As they start discussing quirks, they compare Ishuka's to a blissful ice bird. And she's like, "Oh, thank you." As Ochako and her start talking. And Todoroki also buds into the conversation. All three of them start talking to each other. And Ochako asks, "So have you ever been in a relationship before, Ishuka?" As Ishuka's like, "No, I haven't ever been." "Why?" As Ochako blushes like, no, nothing like that. And I was just wondering. I mean, there isn't much to talk about, really. As Todoroki says, yeah, no, I don't think any of us have. As Ishuka says, "So what are you two's quirks?" As Ochako says, "My name is Ochako Uraka, and my quirk is gravity. I can make stuff float. I can make myself float. And to release them from anti-gravity, I simply put both my hands together, finger by finger, and say, 'Release.'" As Ishuka's like, "Yeah, and what's yours, Shoto?" As Shoto says, "My quirk's half and half fire, half ice." As Ishuka says, "Half fire? I haven't seen you use fire yet. I've only seen your ice. Can I see it?" As Todoroki says, "Fine, but I don't like doing this a lot. I just want to let you know that." As Todoroki lets out fire next to them. As Ishuka's like, cool. As Ishuka looks to him and says, we're kind of like a duo. We both have ice. Except I guess I'm more powerful. As she, flaps her wings that unfold. As Ochaka's like, you have wings? As the entire class looks over at them. As Ishuka's like, yeah, I have wings. They're pretty cool. As Sai and Ray walk over and says, hey, you three. What are you doing? As Ishuka's like, oh, hi, Ray. Hi, Sai. And we were talking about our quirks. I was showing them my wings. I haven't gone onto the tail yet. Or the little crown, as I like to say. As Ochako's like, a tail? As she reveals the little tail on her back. And it's not like a normal tail. It's kind of like strips of paper. But no, it's exactly like strips of paper. And she shows her the little crown on her head that comes out of her. And it's as you see in the picture, on top of Articuno's head. Anyway, they arrive at the USJ, Unforeseen Simulation Joint. And 13 starts explaining the rules to both Class 1A and 1SA. And when they're all listening, Bakugo gets a glance at Ishuku, and he just thinks, hate her. As he says that because, she was the popular one. And everyone was obviously huddled around her. She was the center. So Bakugo said, that's my competition. As when they get into the massive USJ, they all crowd onto the top of the stairs. And as 13 keeps explaining, Ishuku says, Miss 13, why is there villains down there? Or are those fakes? Sorry if I'm wrong. As 13 says, villains? Aizawa, was there a As Aizawa says, no, there was not. As both the Shiketsu teacher and the other teacher, Aizawa, get prepared. And they start going down to attack the villains that are pouring out of the portal. As Ishuku says, what? Villains? As she cups both of her hands to her mouth and sends massive ice shards down there towards the villains. And a couple of them actually hit the villains on their necks, paralyzing them for a temporary amount of time and putting them down. And yeah, that helped Aizawa and their teacher a little. But when Shigaraki arrived, not much change, except Aizawa doesn't get hurt by his elbow because the Shiketsu teacher is there. And Ishuku says, watch out, teacher, as the Shiketsu teacher is punched into the wall by the Nomu, and Aizawa is stomped onto the ground as the Nomu begins bashing his head in, as Shigaraki says, I'm not the final boss. I'm nearly the spokesperson, as the Nomu is built and designed to defeat All Might. You two heroes may be strong, but you are nothing compared to the Nomu and his destructive power. As Ishuku says, everybody who has an ice quirk crowd around me, as a massive ice lightning bolt shaped figure appears, as Todoroki puts his hand on her shoulder and the ice begins forming, and it makes one massive lightning bolt of ice. And she says, "Tectonic smash," as one of the Shiketsu kids had an earthquake where they could basically bend the earth, and two boulders also put layers around the lightning bolt, and some kid also had a lightning quirk, so now it was like a lightning bolt, and it hurled towards the Nomu. And the Nomu jumped at it, caught it, and when it went to catch it, though, it got severely damaged, as it also pierced through the heart and the brain. As the Nomu looks up to them, unfazed, and takes it out of the vital organ and throws it back at them, as Articuno, no, Ishuku says, "Everybody, get behind me," as she makes a massive ice wall with the flap of her wing, and she says, "That was scary," as the Nomu comes through the ice, starting to beat up the students. Every student is one punched into the wall. And when it's Ishuku, Todoroki, and Sai left, Ishuku says, "We can do this. Sai, get Rei." As Rei, who's knocked out on the floor. And Sai says, "No can do, sis. We'll have to do a weakened state." As she says, "Oh, that's fine." As they hug each other, but they start forming into one being. And they come out as a beast and start fighting the Nomu. But the Nomu immediately throws them into a wall and drop kicks the both of them straight up. And when they both hit the roof, smacking their head against it, they fall down, very concussed, as the Nomu then spikes them into the wall, both of them getting taken out of their fused form, knocked out indefinitely. As Todoroki then looks over and says, "Stupid beast," as he quickly freezes the Nomu, and thinking, I think that was it, as he turns around to go check how his classmates are doing. And when the Nomu then breaks out of the ice and knees him in the back, nearly shattering his spine, as he immediately falls unconscious onto the ground. The Nomu walks outside because he smelled somebody, and that's when All Might is in front of him and says, "So you're the one," as they immediately start clashing outside of the USJ. And when All Might throws the Nomu back into the USJ forcefully, as he runs by to go combo the Nomu, he takes a glance at all the students who are knocked out, and he sees Todoroki bleeding out from the back. And he says, poor kid, as both the Nomu and All Might begin clashing. And eventually the fight ends with Shigaraki trying to help fight with the Nomu, but the Nomu being defeated, and All Might being saved by the other heroes who had arrived for backup. And yeah, that's where I'll be leaving off on part 2, everybody. Yeah, so our 2 ships are Ish Ocha, and I'll say Ishu Roki. Yeah, okay. Because we'll say Ishuku is a top because yeah. Don't demonetize me, YouTube. You never heard that. Okay, this is Obito signing off. Bye-bye.